That's it.
It is time for another episode of the Cultural Hall. This episode, a long time coming, about a year. I don't know how long ago it was. My buddy over at Leading Saints, Kurt Frankum, he said, "You know who you need to talk to." And I said, "Kurt, don't boss me. I do my own thing." And he said, "I talked to this guy named Jeff. He does this thing. It's called Hello Saints." And I'll be honest with you, whenever Kurt tells me something, I sort of go, that's all right, Kurt. I'll do something else. Then I had the opportunity to go through the St. George Temple renovation and, walk through before we rededicated the whole thing with Pastor Jeff. And, well, I have decided I did Kurt wrong. I did all of this audience wrong by not over a year ago visiting with Pastor Jeff. So we finally made it happen. Welcome into the Cultural Hall, Jeff.
Hey, I love to meet Kurt's friends because he's got good friends, and you're one of them. So I'm glad that we're connecting.
Well, my immediate response was, "Don't call me his friend," but he is actually my friend. We talk quite a bit. He does an amazing job with Leading Saints. He does a mediocre job with This Week in Mormons. So I appreciate the heck out of him and what.
Sounds like there's a history there.
Well, I mean, listen, if you rally people against a common enemy, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, there's power there.
You'll forgive me that I'm a minute or two late. One of the things that sticks in my mind about Pastor Jeff, and if you don't know Hello Saints, I'm going to have him sort of tell people what that's all about. But first, you know that he's an attractive gentleman. And I sort of looked at myself in the mirror about 10 minutes ago, and I said, "This won't do. There will be video of this." And I have to at least sort of up the bar a little bit if we're going to spend some time together. So I apologize about my moment's tardiness. It didn't do me much good, but you should have seen me before.
So this is raised bar Richie right now.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
No.
It was sweaty gym pants and a shirt that I'm not sure how old it is, but I should have let go of it a long time ago, but I just can't.
Well, we're at that age where that happens more and more. So you have grace from me.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate your grace. Something that other folks from different churches do a lot better than us. Tell people what Hello Saints is all about.
Yeah, so Hello Saints is a YouTube channel that I started. Technically, I started rolling production on it 2 years ago, but it launched in March of last year. So it's been a little over a year and a half. And the overall idea here is I'm a pastor from the Midwest, and I don't have much interaction in all of my years of life with Latter-day Saints. Took a trip out to Utah a few years ago and was sort of I sometimes will use the word exposed to the Latter-day Saint culture, but I would say I was introduced to Latter-day Saint culture in ways that felt like, in a sense, it was like I was being exposed to a cross-cultural experience that I was just so unaware of. And the more I looked into it just on my own and saw the complexities and the layers of interest that existed from a doctrinal standpoint, a historic standpoint, a cultural standpoint, things that were just mind-blowingly similar to me and other things that were mind-blowingly foreign to me, I just started to investigate, well, what is the relationship like between my tribe and Latter-day Saints just in general? So naturally, where do we go when we're investigating anything? YouTube. And as I went there, I just noticed there's not a lot of good quality, healthy dialogue taking place here. I mean, there's a little bit here and there, but generally speaking, it's us v them. And I was like, man, I would love to have more conversations and learn more. And it seems like people in my tribe aren't really taking charitable steps in that direction. And I'm also getting the impression that, all content creation aside, that just your everyday Latter-day Saint is probably not going to knock on the door of a church to sit down and have a conversation with a pastor. Sure. So I was like, well, why don't I just go to them? I'll just be a pastor and start creating content, chronicling my exploration, and to do so with a disarming, relational approach. The way I've been putting it lately is like, be emotionally healthy about it. And the way I've been doing that is by my mantra is fighting criticism with curiosity. So I'm not going to go in with the clip loaded with all the ways that I'm right and you're wrong.
Sure.
But I'm going to ask questions. I want to learn. I want to be informed about who you are and what you're about. And it's just been a very rewarding endeavor.
So when you talk about your tribe, everybody wants to know, he's a pastor. Is it Is it a whatever goes kind of thing? Is it evangelical? Or are we talking, put
Yeah, good
that in
question.
context for us?
Yeah, because there's a lot of complexities there, but I was coming just from a Protestant evangelical viewpoint. I mean, I am pretty passionate, and I've just recently moved out to Utah, but when I was back in the St. Louis area, I was pretty passionate about a vision to bring the churches together. Not necessarily because we exist divided per se, because one thing that we'll talk about a lot in the Protestant evangelical world is, regardless of our denominations, we are all part of the church, capital C, the body of Christ.
Sure.
And we can passionately disagree on certain issues, but when it comes to core fundamental doctrines, we agree on them. And there's beauty in distinction. There's beauty in diversity. And so that's when I'm talking about my tribe, I'm talking about the broader Protestant evangelical community.
Yeah, I like that. Something that you said sort of makes me think, because as I've sort of, experienced and had the opportunity to talk to people, I think that a lot of times there is that conversation. It's like, you believe in Christ, perfect, you're part of the big C church. And then we Mormons are like, and we want to play too. And you guys are like, nope, we appreciate it. But that's like a different Jesus than we think. And so I know you're trying to claim it is, and maybe we will on these things, and we'll sign the same document as you here. But do Mormons, Latter-day Saints, do we apply when the Protestants, evangelicals look at the big C church? Do you think?
I don't know if I'm the authority there. I think
Sure.
the best we can do is observe how things have been and where things are. There's sort of two angles. Well, there's a few angles, but the two main angles I would look at that from would be, first of all, let's not forget, and this is something that I've been more comfortable just acknowledging, that when the church was established back in the 1830s, it was established on the basis from the church leaders and, Joseph Smith himself, that said all other Christian creeds are an abomination. And we are not just another church. We are the restored church. So from the offset, there was a desire to be seen as different, as distinct as the one true church. So I think if we acknowledge that, and then the other angle we look at this from is, we know that there's been a pretty hostile relationship ever since. And I think over the past, century to half century, the Latter-day Saints have kind of fallen out of even the consciousness of the Protestant evangelical church, where there was a lot of heat in the Midwest during the Second Great Awakening and beyond. We don't, in the Midwest, we really, honestly, 99% of Protestant evangelicals don't know the difference between a Latter-day Saint and a Jehovah's Witness. It's like, it's that far out of sight, out of mind. So I think where we have to forge a new path and a new conversation when we're asking these questions, which is, I don't know, it's quite as simple as me to say, yeah, sure. There are nuances. There's a history. There is important doctrinal considerations that have to be balanced to responsibly kind of talk through that, rather than just put an answer on the table there. Now, I know that that's a slightly political answer, and I'm willing to drill into any of those angles as you'd like, but
well, I think it's an interesting thing, because I think as members of the church, we always want to be like, yeah, we can play too. And then to walk out a little bit of your conversation, it's like, yes, but you called our faith an abomination. And we're like, yeah, but we still want to, can we play too?
Well, and the reality is, those creeds that were called an abomination, we have not swayed from them one iota. Like, we are 100% as adherent to those creeds now as we were then. So if they were an abomination in 1820, then they're still an abomination now. So that's a little bit confusing to us, which is why one of the contributing factors to the broader Christian community kind of pushing away.
I would wonder, though, so you start out to do this thing and you're like, listen, I want to be a bridge builder. I want to learn more. I'm curious. I don't want to be critical. And so you are like, I'm going to step into this. But as any content creator knows, it isn't just like, I'm going to create content and it's going to blow up overnight, and then we're going to do this. So I would love to know kind of that journey from, who in the world is Pastor Jeff, to, oh, of course, did you see the latest thing? He's going to this thing.
Dude, your guess is as good as mine. I planned on releasing videos chronicling this endeavor as a passion side project, as a pastor. in the Midwest, and it took on a life of its own, and it became something. And here's the reason why I've been in like deep kind of inventory mode now, as we're kind of turning the page on a new year, and I'm thinking about what's ahead now that we're in Utah. To me, I think the reason why it has resonated with so many Latter-day Saints is because I am genuinely desiring to connect. So I think that authenticity is refreshing, as opposed to being like agenda driven, to be like, hey, I'm here, now I'm going to take down your church and convince you to join mine. And since I'm not doing that, I think just an authentic curiosity is a nice change of pace. But also, I kind of stumbled into, I think, what Latter-day Saints have across the board desired for a long time. And that is for someone just to like, will you please just take me seriously and hear me out? You don't have to agree, but rather than rolling your eyes and, just patronizing me at every point in a conversation, like, treat me with the dignity and respect to let you know what I am so passionate about and how deep it goes in my existential considerations, my generational heritage with my family. Like, don't just discard that. And since I'm desiring to honor that, I think Latter-day Saints appreciate that. And if those are the reasons why the channel has taken off, I feel so happy and fulfilled in an endeavor like that, because this is all about dignity and respect, even if we disagree.
So when you look back at kind of the beginning of it, you're like, this is going to be a side project. I had no idea it was going to be this. Certainly you didn't think that you were going to end up moving to Utah, which I'm sure we'll get into later on.
Yeah.
But tell me, so when I started the Cultural Hall, this is 12 plus years ago, I was like, I want a way that I can interview famous Mormon people. And then I got like 5 episodes in and I'm like, I'm going to need something else to be able to continue to motivate me. And then I realized that it was much bigger, that I was able to, share points of view and be able to talk to all different folks and be able to bring that. What was it, or has it changed from what you originally thought it would be to what it is today?
Great question. Yeah, I thought that perhaps there would be a little bit of a larger presence of evangelical Protestants who are interested in learning alongside with me. But I think what I'm finding, and it's what I referred to a minute ago, Latter-day Saints in large part, other than outside of maybe the Intermountain area, they're just so out of sight, out of mind. People they're not thinking about it. So part of my moving forward is hoping to like bring more people, to use the term we're using in this call, from my tribe into the conversation, I think would be great. But no, the fact that it has primarily ended up being 98% practicing Latter-day Saints, or I should at least say those who have been in the church for a while, then that was not what I was expecting.
So you start out, and is the thought like, hey, I'm going to go to church and then I'm going to start to read, or like, give me the idea of where the bridge building was going to start, right? I'm going to church, come with me, or where was the first steps?
Yeah, so I'm synthesizing 2 of my greatest passions. One, we'll just look at it for my degrees. My undergrad, audio video production, creative, that I'm synthesizing that with my deep passion when it comes to faith and ministry. And when I put those 2 things together, what I did was I said, well, I'm going to apply my pastoral endeavor, heart, passions, whatever, to, well, how do people do things on YouTube? Well, 2 of the main types of video content on YouTube is React. And this is going back a couple of years, things have evolved since, but React videos and vlogs. So that's what I decided to do. I'm, as a pastor, going to watch content online that is put out by the church and react to it. And I'm going to make vlogs going to Latter-day Saint historic sites, or, Utah, stuff like that, and just vlog my experiences. That turned into me reading through the Book of Mormon, which is one of the videos I'm doing series that I'm doing now, and also bringing Latter-day Saints onto the channel. So my reacts are, I'm still doing some of those, but it's being supplemented a little bit more by bringing Latter-day Saints onto the channel and actually having a two-way dialogue.
So when you look back on it and you go, you know, the time it went from, this might be a fun passion thing to, okay, this is a beast all of its own. What was that moment or moments?
Probably when I released my general conference video. I went to general conference for the first time about 6 months after I launched the channel, and it blew up. And I think the reason it blew up is because obviously that's a strong value proposition. Oh, a pastor went to general conference. There's probably even a reluctant click from a lot of Latter-day Saints, like, here we go, I'm about to get beat up again.
Yeah.
And when instead they saw me confronting a street preacher, they were like, oh, this guy's doing things differently. And I think that that's a pretty strong message, not only to the broader prospective audience, but it also affirmed something in me, like, yeah, the heart of what I've endeavored in is meaningful. Like, my willingness to face down a street preacher who I feel like is being disrespectful in this moment, I think sent a pretty strong message.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to take a quick break. When we come back in the second block, I want to talk about your wife and your family's reaction to, hey, this silly little project, and now you've ended up in Utah. We'll come back and do that in the second block of the Cultural Hall.
Yep.
Here in the second block of the Cultural Hall, you love this episode, send us an email, contact@theculturalhall.com, and be like, man, what took you so long? Pastor Jeff is awesome. Or what? You're letting Jeff into the Cultural Hall? How dare you? Or if you've got another great suggestion, maybe we've been blind to something, it is contact@theculturalhall.com. And if you really like this episode, share it with a friend or leave a review. It helps other people know how awesome not only Pastor Jeff is, but how awesome the Cultural Hall is. So you're doing this little passion project, right? It's a little side thing. Babe, I'm thinking about, synthesizing my this and my this. And now we're moving to Utah. So I want to know, like, wife's reaction at the beginning. Maybe you're starting to spend a lot of time with this. Is there any sort of like scared, or like, what are we doing here sort of thing?
Yeah. Oh man, there's so many ways I could answer that question. I'll do my best to summarize it. But I mean, there's a whole other story a lot of people don't know about. I've been moving everything so far in one direction of, like, I'm Pastor Jeff exploring your world. There's a lot of my backstory that people don't know about, but we've just kind of reached a point where we're like, we just feel like the Lord is calling us to do something that is outside of the norm of what is expected of a pastor, or what is considered like ministry or doing the Lord's work. And so I had already been wanting to, and the pandemic helped with this stuff. We all stopped our stride and took an inventory of life and decided, hey, I think I want to do things differently. And I was no exception to that. So all of that kind of played into what eventually led to the idea for Hello Saints. But funny enough, it was 2 years ago, almost to the day. And I only know that because I know it was around my daughter's birthday, which is November 19th, that I was going to launch Hello Saints. I had recorded like 4 or 5 videos and I was like ready to go. And my wife was like, no. I'm like, what? She's like, I'm not ready for you to do that. And this is back when we're still in St. Louis. I'm like, why not? She said, first of all, it's a crazy time of year. We're about to be in the holidays. We got birthdays. Like, I just don't know if it's a good time.
Sure.
Second of all, she goes, this is going to be bigger than you expect. So I need you to hold off. And I honestly was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I've done YouTube before. This is going to get between 200 and 400 views at most. All right.
Yeah.
She's like, no, I don't think you realize, like, I could see this being pretty consuming and pretty big. But I listened to her and held off. Smart. Yeah. Right. Yeah. November, December, January, March. So I held off for 4 months, and I instead launched it in March, the next March. And my wife is super direct and wise because she's from New York. But she was also super gracious. So she's not done an end zone dance or an I told you so. If anything, I've been just super grateful that the Lord has used us as a team, even in a situation like that, where I was wanting to move forward with something. Sure. And she's not necessarily involved. I mean, she's recently started to be in some videos, but this was Jeff's thing. But there was something about even that syncing up then that has sort of set the stage for larger life decisions. Like, once the channel starts taking off, I'm actually already, even prior to Hello Saints, connecting with a lot of pastors in Utah. We like going out there. We like to hike. It's going to be so much easier to do the channel if I was in Utah, not in St. Louis. So let's move. The way the Lord orchestrated that whole thing, I'd be lying if I said there wasn't resistance, because there was. I'd be lying if I said there weren't moments where we weren't syncing up, because there were a lot of moments where we weren't. But the closer we got to the decision, the more the Lord was like, he brought us directly together. And now that we're out here, it comes with its, lately I've been talking about living life in the and. We always live life in the but we need to live life in the and. Where I always say, oh yeah, things are good, but well, it doesn't always have to be about. Sometimes it's an and that's where we're living right now. Like we're grieving what we've left in St. Louis, because that was our life and our community, and we love being out here and we're really excited. So both of those things kind of coexist in our reality at this point.
I want to know if you can speak honestly to this. How much of the popularity of your channel do you think it is as all of us Latter-day Saints going, when is he going to convert? There's going to be a thing that he's going to do. And we all want to sort of be in the journey, and he's curious. And now the Lord has brought him to Utah. How much of the success of this channel do you think is due to sort of our mission work or our curiosity in watching, your faith and testimony, knowledge of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints evolve and grow? And
yeah, I'm sure that's a pretty significant factor. And it's pretty clear in the comments. I don't know if it's necessarily the prevailing source of interest, sure. But as I've talked about before, and you just referenced, we are both proselytizing faith groups. And every time we walk out of church on Sunday, at least in the evangelical world, it is on top of mind. Who can I share the gospel with this week? How can I testify of Christ to the people within my sphere of influence? So knowing that is part of the culture and just the zeitgeist of Latter-day Saints, I'm not naive enough to think that it's probably not that big of a factor, because I know that it is. But I had a conversation with someone last night it was like a webinar with Latter-day Saint, and we talked about this quite a bit. And I was processing with him how important it is to see the value in this conversation beyond the fingers being crossed that we're going to convert one another. Sure. There's more conversation to be had.
Sure. So then I guess the other question that I have, and this may be a fairly deep question, or maybe you've been asked it a bajillion times and whatever, but do you think you could ever be converted? I think you're a believing person to know, listen, Christ can do all things, whatever. But the premise of so much of what you're doing now is that you are the fish out of water doing this thing. Do you believe that you would have the emotional integrity or honesty to be able to leave behind, because it's a different thing at the point that you go, yeah, now I'm a Latter-day Saint talking about Latter-day Saint, but I used to be a pastor. Do you think that you could, and I'm not saying that you will, and I'm not putting that on you, as an individual, I'll give you as kind of a thing that I did for a long time. My thing was that I was a single Latter-day Saint. I was older, and it is embarrassing for me to think about now. But one of the hardest considerations for me before I got married was not, do I love this person? Was not, do I want to spend the rest of my life with this person? Was not any of those things. It was, do I want to let go of the fact that I am the single LDS person who A, B, C, D, E, F, G? Do you think that you could do that if in fact you had some sort of converting moment?
There is a lot there. I will say the premise of the question needs to be assessed. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
For a couple reasons. The first one being this. There's a lot of individuals who will leverage accusations or questions against me, like, oh, well, he couldn't convert because this is how he makes his living.
Sure.
Right. Well, problem solved. I stepped back from my congregational role last year. It's not how I make my living. And so it's when it comes to the idea that like, well, you're a pastor, and then you wouldn't be able to be a pastor anymore. You're not willing to make, are you willing to make big life changes for the sake of something that you strongly feel convicted about?
Mm-hmm.
I lived in St. Louis for over 40 years. It's where my family is, where my friends are. I'm willing to make big life changes that will significantly impact the trajectory of not only my life, but my wife's life and my kids' life. So I'm not looking to lean back into my comfort zone. So I think both of those things need to be acknowledged as how I'm wired.
Yeah.
And it's important to put out there. From the larger question of could I ever see myself converting? And I'm hoping that there's a willingness to take this for what it is, because it's not my desire to somehow take jabs at the Latter-day Saint Church or beliefs or anything like that. It's just my honesty. In my pursuit so far, I've dived head in. Delved. There it is. Delved. Man.
Yeah, okay. No, you're good.
That's why we need you, Richie. Into it head first, and I've been immersed in it, and I've been learning everything I can from people in relationship, General Conference talks, Book of Mormon. And the reality is, you know, like even as I'm reading through the Book of Mormon, people are like, but isn't it like, don't you want that to be true? Like, doesn't that seem true? And I just have to be honest and say it is not convincing me. I'm just not convinced.
Yeah.
And it's not because I'm not reading sincerely. Again, I mean, that's another thing people bring, well, but if you read it sincerely with true intent.
Yeah.
It's like, guys, I have immersed myself in this. I've stepped away from everything I've known to immerse myself. There's plenty of sincerity here. Personally, for various reasons, various factors, I'm just not convinced.
Yeah.
And this is the last thing I'll say to answer that question. Again, there's a lot of complexities here.
Sure.
I love to be able to communicate to you and would like for it to be acknowledged. I have a passionate relationship with Jesus. Like, he has changed my life. And I'm not kind of like stumbling through life trying to find, investigating. In 1994, God came into my life. The lights went on. I was transformed and everything changed for me. I was born again by the Spirit of God, and it changed everything about my life. And since that point, I live in deep, intimate relationship with God Almighty. And it is rippled into every aspect of my existence, in the here and now and in the eternal. And I live with a hope that is so hard to contain. I have devoted my life to telling people the beauty of the hope that's found in Christ. And I'm not in want. There's nothing that I have learned so far that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints teaches or offers that can add anything to that. It doesn't augment. It doesn't offer anything more than what I already feel like I have. So those are all reasons that are factoring in right now as to why I would say super long answer. No, yeah. I don't think I would convert.
Take me to the moment in 94 when Christ came into your life and it was changed. That seems like that's something we should, if at the point that you're comfortable or willing to talk about. I would love to know about what that was like before, and then in that moment, and then immediately after.
I'm a church kid. I'm 14 years old. I've grown up in the church. My parents are passionate followers of Jesus, but refused to just allow us to think that church was all about religion. My parents, my dad especially, very much instilled in us, Jesus came to defy religion. That was his ministry. All of these people who felt that they religiously had it worked out and checked all the boxes, and they were completely missing the heart of God. My dad and my mom modeled for me a relationship with Jesus, and I observed it, but it wasn't my own. I would go to church. I would go to Sunday school. I would agree. But it was still religion for me. And then it was on a Sunday evening. We had a pastor. He wasn't a pastor of the church I was at. He was actually a traveling kind of guy who was speaking on a Sunday night. I was standing in the balcony with a bunch of other middle schoolers, and almost audibly, it wasn't audible, but almost audibly in my spirit, the Lord, I don't know what was said or what was going on, was like, hey, all of this is about relationship. It's not about religion. And as soon as that light went on, it was a metaphysical transformation. I felt like I came alive, and I was like, oh my goodness, my creator loves me. He wants relationship with me. He doesn't want my religion. He wants my heart. He doesn't want me to try harder to please him. He wants me to surrender everything I have to him and see how much he can fulfill my deepest longings. That is the essence of any relationship. And with God Almighty, who's my loving Savior, like it transformed everything. And from there, and it hasn't ceased. I mean, I was at school that week being like, hey, I need to tell you about Jesus. Like, where do you go to church anywhere? You know, Catholic kids in a mining town in Illinois. Where are you going to church on Sunday? You're going to come with me. I'm telling people about Jesus. I'm starting Bible studies at my school. I'm getting involved in youth group at church.
Wow.
And I was transformed. I was born again.
Wow.
Yeah.
I got to know this because Mormons, we pride ourselves on being a peculiar people. I'm sure that with you being in the spotlight, that there are, I mean, just from being in a public sphere with you at the St. George Temple when we did that walkthrough, that people kind of go, oh, is that? I'm pretty sure, which means people have got to feel super comfortable to go up to you and to say things.
Yeah.
I know, and I don't need names. Please don't give names. But I would love to know, like, the most awkward, hey, Jeff, I just wanted to tell you about, or did you know, or most awkward interaction that you've had with a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints?
It's a great question. Now, here's the deal. Online, there's a contingent of people that really don't like me, and that's fine. I don't expect everybody to like me. And I get plenty of shade thrown at me online, right?
Mm-hmm.
Put it that way. When it comes to anybody that I've interacted with, like run into, past it, you know, Smith's or gas station, whatever, I haven't had a single individual have a negative encounter with me.
Interesting. Not even like awkward, like, you know what you need to do, Jeff? None of that kind of stuff?
No. Again, I could point to plenty online, but in person, most people have been super gracious and loving and appreciative. And here's when I know, like, yes, they get it. They're like, hey, even though you disagree with us, thank you for just respecting us and giving us a space to talk. Mm-hmm. Like, I love it when they're willing to acknowledge, yeah, I know we don't agree, but that's okay. Let's still talk. That is everything to me.
So I have to know, you're talking about that being a pastor when you lived out in the Midwest, and now you don't pastor a church currently. You're not.
I'm not in a congregational role. I'm still, I'm a licensed minister. I'm an ordained minister, and I am working. The best way for me to put this that would make sense, I think, in a Latter-day Saint context, is I'm pastoring or working more at the stake level as opposed to in the local level right now. Now, that being said, I'm still involved in the local church. I'm preaching across the valley. I'm preaching back this Sunday at a church in Draper. And yeah, so I'm still very much doing pastoral work. It's just not in the traditional, congregational role at the moment.
I guess my question is more, those people become your family. These are people that you've known for a long time, that you've been able to help through marital problems or job loss and all of those things. And similar, I guess, to how we would say, like, a bishop in the Latter-day Saint Church, they're called for a time. It's their, anytime that it's not their professional thing, it is what they're doing, but it is your professional thing. So it's what you're doing sort of all the time. And then you sort of leave that family. You mentioned the grieving as you came here. Like, how do you grieve that particular loss? I think there's value for that for anyone that might have a particular calling. But how have you grieved that loss, and what does it look like?
Man, I love that question. Because so often we see grief as something that we need to tamp down. We need to move away from it. And grief needs to be experienced. It needs to be felt. Grief is healthy. This is why Jesus grieved at the tomb of Lazarus. Like, he knew that he was about to raise him from the dead. But I think there's something profound about even the writer of Scripture to record the fact that he wept and he grieved in that moment. When we don't grieve, we hold in our honesty about this existence and about our life. And as a result, this need to just be happy, or to, like, it's not that bad, or explain it away, becomes inauthentic. Mm-hmm. And for me, there were some months where I had to, first of all, grieve an identity crisis, as Pastor Jeff, the guy that was, like, involved in so many people's lives and on a day-to-day basis was just in that position, in that role. And God just quite graciously was like, yeah, you need to go through an identity crisis. Like crisis is where I step in and do transforming work. The grief of us leaving friends and family is looking to the Lord and him saying, yeah, it hurts. It's painful because relationships are good. I've created you for relationships. So when they leave, it's bad. So let's be honest, like this hurts. And here's how we grieve. Here's how I grieve it. I believe that we serve a God that at his very essence hovers over the surface of the deep, that is formless and void. And in that chaos and in that formlessness says, let there be. And he can't say, let there be, if it's already occupied with something. So in these moments of loss and pain, the formless, chaotic void that exists needs to be experienced in order to provide the space for him to do what he has done since the beginning and to say, let there be. And that's kind of the space that we're living in right now.
I want to take another quick break. When we come back, there's a couple questions we ask everyone who steps in the Cultural Hall. I'll ask you that. Plus, I want to know a little bit about the future of Hello Saints, certainly what's coming up for you. We'll come back and do that in the third block of the Cultural Hall. Here in the third block of the Cultural Hall, remember, you can become a Patreon saint of the Cultural Hall. You go to patreon.com/the Cultural Hall. It is where you get to be a part of the secret but not sacred Facebook group where all of the folks are hanging out. We'd love to have you be there. It's as little as $5 a month to be a Patreon saint. Almost 100 strong there. Don't forget, you can become a part of the Cultural Hall back row. That's if you're cheap. That's over 300 people that don't pay money, but we have great conversations there as well. Patreon.com/the Cultural Hall. You're laughing a little bit, which lets me know, Jeff, that you know the culture behind the secret but not sacred, and obviously the patron saints.
Heck yeah.
Patreon saints. I don't know where we come up with it, but I just feel blessed that God allows us to make those jokes.
It's all perfect. Yes. You gotta laugh sometimes.
Thank you. So family moves here with you. You've got kids and you live in a suburb. I'm not going to tell everybody where that is, of Salt Lake. How old are your kids?
My kids are, let's see here. One turns 15 on Sunday. So 15, okay. 13, 10, and 6.
Okay. So uprooting their life quite a bit as far as that goes. I have to know, Utah has this sort of notorious thing for those people are not members of the church. You can't play with them, or play with them so that you can invite them to your church things. How has that reception been for your family?
Great question. That was part of our decision. Like when we moved out here, we decided to aim toward a place that was a little bit more diverse than, Utah at large. So since we're in Salt Lake County, and it's pretty diverse, and we have yet to experience that. In fact, if anything, we've had a lot of Latter-day Saints be super gracious and inviting. We haven't had any negative interactions with Latter-day Saints yet, and our kids are in public school, and they say it's pretty diverse there. So we haven't really run into any of that. Though I know that friends of mine that have moved into, like Utah County, other places like that, they run up against that a little bit more. So.
Okay. So then I also want to know, you're visiting places like we went to the St. George Temple together, which was great. It was fun to be able to be there with you and kind of be like, well, what do you think about this? And you're like, we kind of bantered back and forth, had a good time. What is still on the Hello Saints bucket list, the places that you either have to go or obviously you would know some things would be like, you'd love to see a temple ceiling. Sorry, pal. You got to pay 10% if you want to get into that. And there's some other things we got to do, right? But are there, what beyond maybe some of those, covenant or ordinance things are you hoping to witness, be a part of, go and see that you have not yet?
Yeah, there's just so many layers of the culture. And I think that, a few things that I'm really excited about when coming up for Hello Saints, it has more to do with the people involved than the things that I'm doing. Obviously I've never been to what you guys, I guess, refer to as fast and testimony. I've been to sacrament meeting, but I've never been to that. So I'd like to experience that, or even just going to church in Utah in general. The only time I've been in a Latter-day Saint church was in a suburb of St. Louis. So I'd like to just get a feel for how it's different in this culture out here. But, there's a few things. One, my wife I'm going to be bringing her into the channel. She's going to be more involved just because there's been such a male dominating view offered on the channel. And there are, as many females in the church that probably would desire to hear a female perspective of things. So she's going to be involved in some more videos. Maybe even we've kicked around ideas of like, there might be even videos where I'm not even in them. It's just my wife. It's coming from that female perspective. I just think that's an important voice to bring into the conversation. And then one video I am excited about that we've been planning for months, our friend Kurt Frankham at the Leading Saints podcast. You should go check it out. He's a great guy.
Yeah, but this week in Mormons, meh.
So he took me to my very first Temple open house in Saratoga Springs. And we're going to be shooting a video at the beginning of 2024 of him coming to church with me. So we're kind of do a little role reversal here. And I'm probably going to take him to 3 different Protestant churches that have different styles of worship and have sort of that reverse experience and process some of that together.
Interesting. Okay. I look forward to that. A couple things. When you go to your first fast and testimony meeting, and I don't know why you wouldn't combine it to your first time going to church in Utah.
Yeah.
I want to go be alongside you. I won't distract you. I won't talk to you during the meeting, but I genuinely mean it when I say, hey, I'm going this ward this time, and I would love to be a part of that.
Yes. The answer is yes. I would love that. I need
You need a what?
I need a wingman.
Yeah, of course. And the second thing is you should also know, and probably do, some folks call that open mic Sunday when we do the fast and testimony meeting. Just know that it literally, depending on where you go and what you hear, like it can be anything. And that is both the beauty and the distracting nature of fast and testimony meeting.
This is one of those areas where, believe it or not, I 100% can relate, because I grew up in a very charismatic Pentecostal church. And not only did we have our own, what we would call testimony times, where people could give their testimonies, open mic, and things would get super weird sometimes. But I also grew up in a church where there was a strong belief that the gifts of the Holy Spirit were active. So I guarantee, when it comes, in all relative here, I'm not trying to speak disrespectfully, but where Latter-day Saints are kind of like, hopefully it's not weird when you go that Sunday. I could out-weird you all day long when it comes to some of the stuff I experienced growing up. So you're good.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, and look forward to the video, of course. Hello, Saints. You can find it on YouTube. Have you ever, trickled your way into some of the other things, like doing, something like another faith, or is this the focus, or are there other things that maybe you're like, well, when this gets done, we might do wedding videos?
So yeah, I'm actually in that mode right now. I'm thinking about that pretty focused state of mind at the moment, just because, there's only so many times pastor's first time can happen as I'm doing these explorations. And that being said, I'm not going to stop doing Hello Saints. There's so much to talk about. The conversation, I'm going to keep the conversation going, but I have started to think about, if this is so meaningful to so many people, what could it look like if applied differently, specifically the fighting criticism with curiosity? And I've kicked around ideas, a few. Yeah, obviously looking at other faiths. One that would be most natural to me would be Hello Catholics, because I grew up in a highly Catholic area, and I've got family, my wife has family that are devout Catholics. But I don't know. The answer is maybe. But I'm also thinking about it. Are there ways that I can use this as sort of a case study to put together even online courses or something like that on how we can maneuver through difficult conversations with kindness and charity, even when it gets difficult? So I've kicked around a few ideas on how sort of the secret sauce of, as I've been putting it, the emotionally healthy and careful approach of fighting criticism with curiosity can be applied differently. A
book?
I'd love to.
Book? Yeah.
If anybody wants to, give me in advance, I'll write it.
Yeah, done. You're like, go ahead, pay me up front. We're on that book. Yep. When you talk about bringing your wife in, certainly in the videos, you have the 4 kids. How much of this, like being able to fight criticism with curiosity and that kind of stuff. How much of that conversation is had with your children, and how do you navigate it?
Regularly. And it's an ongoing thing. And the way we navigate that is by making sure that our kids feel safe to question. That's really huge in our culture, specifically in the evangelical world. I would tell people in my church, like, if you really want to know what you believe, go to like anti-evangelical, anti-Christian sites and see what people are saying. I would tell people, go to this Muslim apologetics message board and see what Muslims say about Protestants. Like, it's safe for you to face things that you're not comfortable with, you're not sure about, and to wrestle with it. I mean, Jacob, his very name, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, was changed to Israel, which means wrestles with God. His chosen people are given the name wrestles with God because he is okay with us wrestling with things. So the way we handle this with our kids is we say, listen, life is never in straight lines. It's always messy. And yet there is truth and there can be a confidence, but you're going to have to get there. You're going to have to maneuver through a lot in your life to get there. So we just try to provide a safe space for them to ask questions, and they are never, ever shamed for asking questions. We try to apply that same, it's safe to be curious here. Let's try to work on this together. So that's the approach that we try to take with them.
I think it's a valuable lesson, especially as you know, the foundations of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was based on, I don't know, let me go and ask, and somehow in some ways, some folks have sort of removed us from, don't ask questions, ask them in this way, or ask them of these people. Don't just randomly ask questions or ask God to answer your questions. It's a frustrating point, and I'll share it as my frustration, not yours, so you don't get crucified as far as that goes. That it's a thing where it's like, listen, if truth is truth, then if I question it, then truth will still be truth. Yes. If I'm reading something and I go, I don't know about that, truth is still truth. It's not that, this false thing morphs into truth and then quickly, it's all those things. Truth is truth is truth is truth. Yeah. And then we say things like, but my truth, Pastor Jeff. And we were able to negate whatever. I have a question, one that we ask everyone who steps into the cultural hall, and I'll ask that question of you right now. Interpret it however you will, but the question remains, what is your favorite part of your faith?
Oh, that's a great question. Thanks for asking that. And I will answer it without getting emotional, because that's not the type of conversation we're having right now, but we're talking about deeply meaningful things. The most important thing about my faith is what I was referring to a minute ago, that I believe that we serve a God who enters into the mess with us. He doesn't expect or require perfection, but he became sin who knew no sin, so that we might become his righteousness, is what the scriptures say, which means there's an exchange. We serve a God that's willing to give us an exchange. He'll enter into the mess to bring us to a place of healing, restoration, redemption. And the favorite part of my faith is, specifically in the evangelical Protestant world, is our focus on God's grace, that it's God's riches at Christ's expense. He paid the price. He entered into the mess. He entered into the darkness and the sin. John chapter 3, he entered into the darkness, and the darkness hated him. But he's bringing light, right? And as a result, we don't have to earn it. He's the one that took the initiative and took that step. So his gracious sort of lavishing of his love, as Paul says it, lavishing of his grace and his mercy on us in the midst of our mess and our brokenness is the most beautiful thing to me in my faith. Because what that means then is that I can just rest in the fact, not get complacent, but accept the fact that I am still broken and I'm still messy, and I'm going to need his grace on an ongoing basis. And he's there for it. He is the father of the prodigal son. running, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he's not saying, "Oh, you took everything I gave you. You took your inheritance and you squandered it. So you're going to have to earn that back." Nope. He left that with the hogs. He said, "I'm going to give you my robe. I'm going to give you my ring. We're going to throw a party." That's God's grace. And knowing that, like, that's my hope in this life. And that's my hope in what I have to look forward to. That's the type of God that I serve, is a God that's so gracious and loving. So that's where I exist, man, in need of his grace.
One question that sort of came to my mind as you were talking that maybe we ended on. There are those that are religious who would say, but it is our job. If we feel like we have the truth, and this can be any particular thing, I'm not saying, evangelical or Mormonism or whatever, right? But if I allow you to think the thing that you're doing is the thing that you should be doing, and I don't share the thing that I know and tell you this is how it's different, or this is how it's wrong, or this is what you need to do, then, there's some sort of thing on me. Those people that feel compelled to think that way, what would you say to them?
I would say to them, I get where you're coming from, and we should have a level of urgency to help others see the truth. But at the end of the day, we can't convince anyone. No one convinced you. You had to get there yourself. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the best thing we can do is be a herald for what we believe to be true, and to have the conversation and to leave it in the Lord's hands. In the meantime, in the process, and this is a sermon I'm preaching on Sunday, and since this might air after I preach a sermon and no one listening to this will probably go and listen to that sermon, I'll just tell you that the point of that sermon is this: whenever we're engaging in conversations with people on faith and religion and people that might not agree with us, you can try to make as many points as you want, but if you miss the person, you miss the point. Jesus came for the people. He came not to condemn, but to save. It's for God so loved the world. He loved the world that he sent his only son, that whoever believed in him would have eternal life, right? So we have to be careful about being more concerned with winning an argument than winning the person. We have to be careful about being more concerned about walking away satisfied that I've made my points, all the while missing the person. So I think that it's just really important that we honor and give reverence to the individuals that we're speaking to. And I hear the response right now of people saying, "Yeah, but if you really love them, then you're really going to hit them with the truth." Listen, in some cases, that might be true. But in most cases, I think people are more interested in just connecting on that relational level of a humane, respectable conversation, and then leaving it with me to process through that and make the decisions I need to make. And we need to have peace there.
Yeah. Pastor Jeff, you can find Hello Saints. It's over there on YouTube. There will be a link in the show notes. Someone get that man an advance on a book. Let's get a book, for crying out loud. And hello Catholics, I'm here for it. I want to be one of the early investors. Whatever we need, whatever you need. I've got dollars. I don't have much more. It's not tens of dollars, but singular dollars to be able to add to the cause. Pastor Jeff, we hope that this episode has nourished and strengthened your body, that if you're not healthy enough to listen this week, that you'll be healthy enough to listen next week. And then when the time comes, you will be able to travel home in safety. In the meantime, we'll be saving a seat for you on the back row of the Cultural Hall.